May 1, 1943, 21,000 feet over Saint-Nazaire, France. A B-17, named the Windy City, Avenger, shudders as flak bursts open the sky around it. Inside the radio compartment, 22-year-old Staff Sergeant Maynard Smith watches an incendiary round punch through the fuselage and ignite the floor beneath him. Fuel lines hiss. A wounded gunner slumps against the waist gun, blood pooling on aluminum. Smith does not call for help. There is no one to call. He grabs a fire extinguisher in one hand and drags the wounded man clear with the other, then throws himself back into the flames because the ammunition is starting to cook off. Below him, the English Channel is 100 miles of empty water. The nearest friendly airfield might as well be the moon. He keeps fighting the fire anyway, because somewhere over the Atlantic, a training command in Texas has already built the next version of him. Smith is not a career airman. 6 weeks earlier, he was a mechanic from Michigan who had washed out of pilot training. Now he carries a fire extinguisher, a .50 caliber belt, and a private conviction that he will not survive the mission. He does not know that his actions this afternoon will earn him the Medal of Honor. He does not know that the aircraft he is fighting to save is one of nearly 13,000 B-17, that will roll off American assembly lines before the war ends. He only knows the smoke, the altitude, and the 20-year-old gunner bleeding out 3 feet away. This is not a story about one burning airplane over France. It is a story about a machine the Luftwaffe could shoot at every single day and never once dent. German Fighter Command built entire mathematical models predicting exactly how many American bombers they needed to destroy per raid to make daylight bombing collapse. They hit those numbers mission after mission. Their kill ratios matched their own projections almost exactly, and the bombers kept coming anyway, not fewer of them, but more, newer, faster, better armed, flown by crews who had trained on better simulators than the ones shot down the week before. This is a story about what happens when a nation stops thinking about war as a battle of attrition and starts thinking about it as a battle of replacement rate. Germany was fighting the airplanes in the sky. America was fighting from a factory floor 8 time zones away, and the factory floor was winning. To understand why the Luftwaffe's math kept failing, you have to go back further than Pearl Harbor, back to 1938, when a Detroit engineer named Charles Sorensen toured a consolidated aircraft plant in California and watched skilled machinists hand-fit bomber parts, one at a time, the way German and Japanese factories still would be building aircraft 5 years later. Sorensen had spent his career under Henry Ford, perfecting the moving assembly line that had already remade the automobile industry. He looked at aircraft manufacturing and saw a craft industry pretending to be an arms industry. By 1941, Ford Motor Company had committed to something no aviation engineer thought was possible, building a 4-engine heavy bomber, the B-24 Liberator, on a moving assembly line, using the same interchangeable parts logic that built Model Ts. The result was Willow Run, a bomber plant built on farmland outside Ypsilanti, Michigan, so large that workers rode bicycles down its internal corridors. German intelligence assessments from 1942 dismissed the idea outright. Aircraft, their engineers insisted, required skilled hand assembly. A heavy bomber could not be mass-produced like a car. What the math did not account for was Willow Run's dilution of skill itself. Ford did not need thousands of master aircraft engineers. He needed thousands of workers who could each perform one repeatable task perfectly, over and over, on a line moving at a fixed pace, the exact workforce the American automobile industry had already trained for 3 decades. At its peak, Willow Run rolled a completed B-24 off its line roughly once per hour. By the time Smith's B-17 was burning over Saint-Nazaire, that plant alone had already begun outproducing what German intelligence believed the entire United States capable of building in a year. The airplane, though, was only half the machine. The other half was the man flying it, and that pipeline was arguably more radical than the factory. The Army Air Forces built a training system explicitly designed to replace losses faster than the Luftwaffe could inflict them. A new pilot moved through primary, basic, and advanced flight schools across Texas, Oklahoma, and California in roughly 9 months. Then joined a fully formed 10-man crew at an operational training unit, where the entire crew trained together as a single unit for weeks before ever crossing the Atlantic. By 1944, that pipeline was graduating tens of thousands of pilots a year, a number German planners considered arithmetically impossible for a nation, also arming its army, its navy, and half its allies simultaneously. The scale was staggering by design. Boeing, Douglas, and Lockheed jointly operated the BVD pool to build B-17s under a single production standard, so that a part built in Seattle fit a fuselage built in Long Beach without modification. Convair and Ford ran matching lines for the B-24. Aircraft engine production, driven by Wright and Pratt & Whitney, climbed from roughly 6,000 units in 1940 to well over 250,000 by 1944. Think about what that means for a moment. In the time it took Germany to design, test, and field one new engine variant, American factories had already built enough engines to re-equip entire air forces twice over. In the same week that Willow Run rolled out its 1,000th Liberator, a German aircraft plant in Regensburg was still relying on forced labor and hand-fitted sub-assemblies. Its output measured not in bombers per hour, but in bombers per minute onth, and that output was falling because Allied raids kept hitting the very factories that could not be dispersed fast enough to survive them. Major General Ira Eker, commanding the 8th Air Force, put the doctrine plainly in a wartime assessment. The bomber offensive would succeed not by avoiding losses, but by outbuilding them. Adolphe Galland understood the arithmetic better than almost anyone alive. As the Luftwaffe's general of the fighters, he had access to every kill report, every intelligence estimate, every production projection German industry could generate. None of it explained what he was seeing by early 1944. American bomber formations, returning in greater strength than before, now escorted the entire distance to Berlin and back by long-range fighters that should not have had the fuel to be there at all. In his post-war memoir, Galland described the psychological toll on his pilots plainly. Men who flew mission after mission, destroyed aircraft after aircraft, and watched the formations grow anyway. He would later describe the appearance of American fighters over the German capital as the moment his pilots understood the war was already lost. This was not a failure of German pilots, who remained among the most skilled in the world. It was a professional soldier's growing recognition that he was fighting a supply chain, not an air force, and that no tactical victory in the sky could outproduce a Michigan farm field turned into the largest bomber factory on Earth. Maynard Smith survived St. Nazaire. The wounded gunner he pulled from the flames did not. Smith received the Medal of Honor weeks later, pinned on by the Secretary of War himself, while he was still confined to base for minor disciplinary infractions. Unrelated to the mission, a detail almost too strange for fiction, and entirely true. Behind him were thousands of names history barely recorded, 19-year-old ball turret gunners who never finished a full tour, radio operators who trained for 9 months and flew for 11 days, replacement crews who arrived at English air bases so quickly that veteran ground crews sometimes did not learn their names before losing them. The machine that Galland could not explain was built out of exactly this. Ordinary young men cycled through an assembly line of training and steel, each one replacing someone who did not come home the week before. Germany never built an equivalent system, and it was not only a matter of steel or aluminum, it was a matter of imagination. German industry remained organized around craftsmanship and rank-based control late into the war, while American industry had already spent a generation learning to turn unskilled labor into precision output, one repeatable task at a time. The Luftwaffe was fighting a war of individual mastery against a war of infinite replacement, and mastery has a ceiling that replacement does not. Picture Smith again, 22 years old, standing in a scorched radio compartment somewhere over the Atlantic, certain he would not make it home. He did because behind him stood a training pipeline in Texas, a bomber plant in Michigan, and an engine line in Connecticut, all of them building faster than any German fighter wing could shoot. The bombers kept coming, not because America built better airplanes, but because America built a system that did not need any single airplane or any single man to survive.